We'll move on to Theresa Ampadu Boakye from the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture in Nairobi.
Hello, everyone. I would say good night because it's 9 p.m. It's 9 p.m. in Nairobi, so probably it can allow me to go to bed. Yes, so I will basically be looking at, after all the talks of the importance of fixing nitrogen, what are the benefits to the smallholder farmer? And I will say a big thank you already to Ken for introducing N2Africa. I will be looking at the topic in the context of N2Africa, which is the project putting nitrogen fixation to work for smallholder farmers. Yes, a bit of context of the project, the benefit, what is needed in terms of the support and some lessons learned. That will be the context of the presentation. What are we looking at? N2Africa is basically a science-based research development project cutting across quite a number of countries, 11 of them, focusing on agricultural productivity, but basically through diversification and intensification of cropping systems. And we are looking at potentially improving nutrition, food security, and then household incomes. It's basically, as Ken said, led by Wagner University, implemented mainly in about 10 countries through International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, through the University of Zimbabwe, and many other partners in all the 11 countries. We had a phase 1 of the project, which was basically the proof of concept, the GL by GR. We proved the concept, yes, it works. Phase 2 of the project, how do we institutionalize those technologies and how do we scale them up? And basically focusing on legumes, looking at 6 main legumes: cowpeas, groundnuts, soybean, common bean, chickpea, and then faba bean. And these cut across the countries per the importance of that crop. The main focus is to introduce these technologies to smallholder farmers. How many are we looking at? Cutting across Southern, Central, Eastern, and Western Africa. And we hope that by the end of the project, which is 2018, we should reach over 700,000 smallholder farmers having the knowledge to be able to use these technologies that we are talking about. So how do we ensure that these technologies, these technologies are maximized by the smallholder farmer? We are looking at increasing the area of land cropped. By so, we'll be able to have the maximum benefit. We are looking at increasing the legume productivity, either through land, either through labor, either through capital invested. We are looking at selecting the best legume varieties based on need. We are looking at the best rhizobia strains. Already it is testified through Ken that this needs to be there, useful for legume production. We also look at input and output markets, creating benefits and opportunities for the smallholder farmer. Certainly, as a project written out to smallholder farmer, you need to have a design as to how do you scale up, how do you use the feedback of these farmers to reshape the technologies you are talking about. So we have what we call delivery and dissemination as the core of the project. Already phase 1 has proven technologies. So we try to deliver and to disseminate such technologies through other means I will show later. Then we have our monitoring and evaluation system, which gets us feedback and which is taken into research. So the project is not looking at a research focused, but is looking at what is that feedback that needs to be researched into and what is working that we can continue to disseminate. Okay. So to start with, as a project, we have heard of the inoculation, but we need to look at it at country level. The starting point is actually looking at superior native strains. Do we have, how do we get the inoculants at the country level? So this is an example from Ethiopia trying to identify best strains for inoculant production. We have tried and selected HB429. We can see there are other strains though, but this actually came out to do well in multiple locations. And this is actually being used currently in the production of inoculants. So do we stop there? If it's useful and we are trying to produce it, what next do we need to do? This is another example from Nigeria, looking at identifying other promising strains for other legumes that we are supporting. Again, in Ethiopia, after identifying those strains, what do we do with them? We go into production of these inoculants. And this is actually showing us the production. Okay, I guess the pointer is working. The production of these inoculants in Ethiopia between 2012 as the production started until 2016. And the sale of these inoculants actually in terms of introducing it through projects or the use by smallholder farmers. And we can see that in 2012, it was only 33% of the production was actually used or sold to smallholder farmers, and compared to 2016, which has been 79%. And these are the main users of these inoculants, being projects or the farmers. That is, unions in Ethiopia is farmer unions or cooperatives. So what we are trying to do is, yes, we identify the strains, yes, we make them available through inoculants, and are we making any moves in making them available to these smallholder farmers? And we say yes. I think my mouse is... The other example is from Nigeria, where we have an inoculant plant that is hosted by International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, which is trying to produce these inoculants to make them available to smallholder farmers. And it has that capacity of about 111,000 packets per year. And this is actually done, produced, and what we do at the project level is to establish partnerships to make sure that these are commercialized, to make it accessible to the smallholder farmers. So these are two key examples at the project level of what is being done to make these inoculants available to the smallholder farmers. In addition, we have a key component, which is capacity building and infrastructure, looking at how best do we make sure that all these countries have inoculants available, have the right legume varieties available and accessible by the smallholder farmers. So we have the capacity building, as Ken said, PhD, MSc students, but again, we have a non-degree training that is done for local partners within all the countries to also assist in terms of sustainability. So, having had the technologies, what is the mode of delivery and dissemination? We can see here we have PPPs, the required components to get the technologies to the smallholder farmers. And this needs to be structured also in terms of sustainability. So we have what we call the public-private partnerships. And this is where the project partner with research institutions, private institutions, to be able to set up, deliver these technologies, make sure they are accessible. And not only that, there are other key factors that needs to drive it. So the public-private partnership will have capacity building in terms of the use of these technologies, the input supply, after the farmer knowing how to use the inoculants, how to do that planting, the density, where and how, what is the mode of delivery, so that that technology will be available. Then we have the dissemination approaches. Through what means would you deliver the technology to the farmer? and market access. This is output market. And what I always say is that yes, the inoculants, the varieties will increase the yield, but at the end of the day, the ultimate line is food security, yes, but also income. So where would that farmer sell it? So the key component of the public-private partnership is also to look at output market, which is a key drive to adoption of these technologies. So this is an example from Tanzania. If we talk of public-private partnerships, how do we do it? Also from Ghana, this is just one key. We have N2Africa coming together with a number of institutions, which is Africa Health Soil Consortium. We have Kabi there, we have Wagner University. Each of these partners has a role to play in making that results achieved, either through productivity, assessing the output market, assessing the input market, whichever it is. All these partners has a role to play. In this example, we can see N2Africa trying to partner and to provide content-wise. What kind of information should get to these farmers? It could be on inoculant, it could be on varieties that are available, it could be on agronomic practices, but we, together with the research organizations, look at the content. Then we have other partners who will look at, let's say, agro-dealer shops. How would these technologies be available in these shops closer, last mile delivery to that poor farmer in that small community? So it's not just about talking and introducing it, but making sure that within that partnership, we have that technology being assessed. Other modes of disseminating the technology could be radio, could be by SMS. All these are put together, and we have individual partners who play the role of making sure that the whole dissemination and delivery is achieved. The basic example of how delivery is done, introducing the technologies through three main modes. We have that set of demonstration where the basic is about 4. This is an example of soybean. So you can have the soybean alone, you can have the soybean with the inoculant, we can have the soybean with P, we can have the soybean with P and inoculant. Basically, we have the demonstrations example of this picture where a group of farmers will try out this technology. Then the second level is what we call adaptations, where that farmer, selected farmers are given a set of these technologies, preferred technology selected by the farmer to try it. This is the level where we assess the adaptation. So if you give a farmer 50 by 10 planting density and it ends up at 60 by 10 or 60 by 15, you compare with that of the original, what we call the best bet, and see, do we reshape the technology to suit? Because that is what the farmer can do. And if the result is closer to the potential, why not? And then we have other means of, let's say, field days, media, but we also use ICT in terms of SMS to reach out to more of these farmers. So this gives an opportunity for farmers to now evaluate at the end of the season to say, I will go with soybean plus P plus inoculation, or whichever adaptation is made, we try to get the feedback and to integrate it. And this is done through firm partnerships. Now, this is an example of where we introduce technologies, and we can basically see that although the technologies might be the P plus the I, but we can see some variations. So at this level, we can see that it's almost 4,500 kg per hectare. These are the soybean grain with the P and I, and this is the control plot. And we can as well see that the same P plus I, some are still hovering even less than 1 ton. What happens is that then the project picks these areas that are doing well to continue with the promotion. And these areas that are not doing well means there are other external factors that we do not know. So this goes back into research to see, is this soil issue? What is really the matter? And this actually helps us to reshape the technologies further. Sorry, it takes a bit of time. We need to ensure that the technologies are available to the smallholder farmers. And what do? In most of these countries, we talk about these inoculants, we talk about improved varieties, but we do not have them. So as a project, it is part of our responsibilities or resource to ensure that these products and technologies are available. And within all the 11 countries, we have these inoculants registered across. If it's not by local production, it should by importation. And what is also done is through those models of input models to make sure that these are also accessible. The other part is, it's also known that legume seeds are not available. So what do we do as a project after you introduce and that smallholder farmer says, this is relevant, this is critical for me, but I don't have it. What we do is to establish what we call community-based seed systems, at least to make these varieties available, because we have seen that these are useful and critical to the smallholder farmer. So basically it's about how do we see or how do we make these available at the community level. The other feedback you get is not only about making it available, but the farmer will tell you, I have 0.25 or 0.3 hectare of land, and that inoculant is for 1 hectare, and I cannot afford it. What do? What kind of support can you provide? This is going to the level of making sure that these technologies are packaged in the size that that smallholder farmer can afford. So you have 100 grams, which can go for an acre, and majority of them can actually go for that. So in a way, it's also looking at, yes, reshaping the technology, but again, in which size to make it accessible to that smallholder farmer. So far, at the project level, we can say that smallholder farmers, yes, are using it, over 160,000 households using that inoculant. And we can also have an estimation of over 49,000 hectares of land being under inoculation at the project level. The other bottleneck for the smallholder farmer to really assess these technologies is the unknown and the fractured demand, which we usually do not see from the research side. So after that inoculant produced in Ethiopia is produced by a private sector, and that private sector needs that basic information to know that I need to produce this quantity to be able to even break even, or whether I'm interested to invest in or not. And to our surprise, the smallholder farmer, there are millions out there, but this is a major bottleneck because the private sector do not have this information to be able to invest in these technologies. So what we do as a project is also to ensure that at the moment, telephone penetration is over 70%. Every village, every farmer is WhatsApping. So how can we capitalize on that WhatsApp and to make it more important to the business that they are doing? So we have these ICT-based systems to predict the farmer demand. We can use short telephone interviews. The other one is linking the farmers to the source of the inputs as well. So we have some last mile delivery guys, agro dealers, and we link them up to farmer groups who can call or who can know that in these locations, these kind of technologies are available. Creating opportunities is not only about making the technologies available, but if you really want them to benefit, there are other opportunities that you have to integrate. I've already mentioned the output market, assessing that market to provide the farmers with the benefits and linking them to buyers, ensuring that that income is sustained and continuous use of the technologies, and then generating that income that they need through the sales. Now we will want to see some evidence from the field as to those farmers who have so far used the inoculants, whether it really makes a meaning for them. And this is an example from, again, Ethiopia, based on chickpea. We can see that about 25% of farmers, this is a sample of over 100 farmers, around 110 farmers that we did in Ethiopia, to see whether they are having any improvement at all in terms of yield and in terms of them combining these technologies and using them, investing their monies. So we can see about 25% of these farmers are actually having a yield of 1 ton over the control. And we have about 37% of the farmers having between 0.5 and 1 ton over the control yield, and we have about 28%. But surprisingly, about 10% of these farmers are using the same P with the I, but it's not working for them. No improvement. And this actually goes back into the research as a project model to see what is the critical factor contributing to this low yield at that particular point. And that gets into diagnostic trials to see what are the issues to reshape the particular technology at that area. Now we want to look at inoculation, whether it makes sense at all and whether the farmer will be adding anything. Should it be only I? Should it be only P? Yesterday I heard someone said, if inoculant is working so well, why do we still need to add the fertilizer? This is just a quick one, whether we can make some economic returns per hectare of the lands that these farmers. We can quickly see from here that the break-even is much faster and quicker when you have the P with the I combined. If you have the P alone, we can see the percentage at which you can have a break-even, which is over 35%. So in a nutshell, yes, some farmers can decide to use only P or only the inoculants, because again here it makes the same break-even with the P. But what we see is that as you expand, the area of that return is much bigger with the P and inoculant. So that farmer can be using the P, but adding on that inoculant makes much more of economic sense. Providing what is preferred. So it's not just about research giving out this variety yields 30% or 40%, but what are the needs of those smallholder farmers and what will be beneficial to them? So in West Africa, we have varieties of cowpea, but farmers will say that we need a short duration one. Why? Because it will allow us to grow 2 crops within the season. It is that yielding, high yielding, we can sell, we can eat, and that period of hunger, we still have food. So it's about what is needed combined with the research. A bit of nutrition aspect. The project also looks at nutrition. It's not only about income, cash crop, but it's also about food and nutrition security. So what do we do there as a project to ensure that this benefit is maximized for the smallholder farmer? We have that enhanced yield and crop diversity that contributes to food security. We engage in nutrition interventions, showing smallholder farmers recipes of legumes that they can use at household level, combining it with several trainings that should be done at household level, value additions and all of that. And at the end, what we do is that we have sort of food and nutrition gaps analysis to really see whether this has contributed to nutritional status of the beneficiary farmers. What are some of the lessons that we have learned? The use of inoculants has a strong economic and agronomic results as indicated, but it needs efforts to avail good quality inoculants. It's not just about producing it. You have to produce, but you have to make sure that there are models to make them available to the smallholder farmer. I'll pick just a bit of them. Integration of farmer technology preference improves adoption. if you pick Ghana, we had varieties of granules and soybean that we introduced. But farmers, based on their needs, will say that we want to sell soya as cash crop, and the market is looking for oil, high oil content. So it's not about your research saying that this is high yielding, but the farmer is saying this is what I prefer. And when we integrate that and introduce those varieties, that is what is being used now in Ghana. So it's more about adoption, but providing what is needed. Working through the partnerships is very critical. It affords you a holistic results achievement. Why? Because you have the research which will focus on demand issues, demand-driven research. You have models from the private sector which will make the inputs available. You have models from the private sector for output market, and you have other issues like information brokerage. So through partnership, the smallholder farmer issues are addressed holistically. Then the other lesson, biggest lesson, is integration of scientific disciplines. It's not just about people identifying the best rhizobia strains, but it's about the research, the social, the economic, everybody combined, because all these are pillars to make sure that the benefits are achieved. Market demand-led research leads to uptake. I think it's already mentioned. Then demand prediction is key for the continual supply of technologies. The private sector needs to invest. If I do not know where the need is, how much is needed, I will not be able to invest. So these are key lessons that we have learned out of the implementation of the project. And I will say thank you.
Well, thank you, Theresa, for a really nice talk. And I think we're still about the same behind, and we can have a few questions.
We might start with a question that came left over from the last talk. Mario Lira Jr. in Brazil is asking about if any work is being done on forage legumes in Africa as part of N2Africa, or maybe other projects. What is being done with forage legumes?
I guess that question should go to Ken.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, within N2Africa, we're looking a lot at the use of the grain legume residues in feed, particularly in northern Ghana, where I think Theresa is at the moment. But we're not specifically focusing on forages. We find that farmers, unless they're in a milk production chain or something which is directly linking them to markets, they really don't usually want to invest in forages. Grain legumes always seem to take priority in our experience. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question. It's amazing how many farmers you're reaching, close to 700,000. What fraction of smallholder farmers in those countries are you reaching? And it seems like there's a multiplier effect. You're touching, 5 times as many farms as original. So what's the prospect for, full implementation of some of these technologies?
Sorry, to get you right, you mean the scaling to millions, right?
Yeah. How many smallholder farmers are in the countries that you're working in total?
This is a good question, but probably a bit difficult to give the exact figure. But I would say that with farmers in those countries, about 60 to 70% are smallholder farmers, or even more. Yes. And looking at the fraction we are reaching, probably you will relate that to the 700,000 we have. And the reason for the PPPs, or the public-private partnerships, is really to make sure that we scale out to all these other farmers. Indeed, if it's only N2Africa reaching out to the 700 farmers, probably we might need a 10-year project. But the public-private partnerships ensures sustainability, ensures continuous introduction of the technologies to the farmers. So the 700,000 might be minute in the ocean, But at the end of the day, the systems being established will support the scaling out of the technologies.
Thank you.
I think we can have one question. Questions from David Granitstein here at Washington State University. How strong is the economic argument for grower for the benefit of the legume to the following crop?
In any ways, what we have established, even before you use the technologies, the smallholder farmers have idea that when you plant the legume and you do rotation, that yield increases without even adding the inoculants and the fertilizers. So there are motivations in terms of the diversifications or the intensification to look at intercroppings, to look at rotations, and that economic motivations is really high in terms of if you pick, for instance, maize, or if you pick, you go to Uganda, you have climbing beans with banana. The farmers will always do that intercropping. Why? Because it serves a dual purpose. Now they are able to have it as cash, and through that planting of that climbing bean, it also adds on to the banana as well. So that economic benefits is really high.
Great.
We might have to put some figures, yes, but I don't have it offhand, yeah. But we have it per crop.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Theresa.